Corn School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to the Corn School. Today I'm in Arkell, Ontario, catching up with Ontario's corn specialist, Ben Rosser. Ben, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Bernard?
I'm good. Hey, I want to talk about nitrogen, side dress, and how we manage this crop. It is a strange crop. It's been a strange year. We're standing in almost knee-high, six-leaf corn. There's farmers still planting corn. I mean, how do you sum up this year? What are you seeing?
Yeah, and there's a lot of corn crops out there. Like you said, corn's still going in or just popping up out of the ground to some fields that are getting close to almost closing rows. Yeah. Not strange for a year with the moisture that we've had.
Yeah, but it makes for a really tough conversation when it comes to nitrogen. We basically got two crops, right? When it comes to side dress now, a lot of growers are thinking about mineralization and the weather in their situation. How does that impact, availability?
Yeah, so I think things were nicely summed up. Colin Elgie, our soil fertility specialist, just put an article up on Field Crop News. From a year like this year where we start warm, we usually think, well, that's good for mineralization. It's going to get things moving along. Maybe supply is a little bit higher than normal for this time of year. But then you add moisture in. We want some moisture for mineralization, but you don't want so much that's going to set things back. Microbes that do it are like us. They want some water, but not too much. And on the flip side, if you've got excessive moisture, things have stayed saturated, maybe there's a potential for loss in some areas as well, especially those heavy, poorly drained soils.
Yeah. So how do we approach it from a recommendations perspective? PSNT, since testing has always been there, is that something we should be looking to?
It's one option, yeah. So going in and doing a PSNT sample, it's going to give us an idea of soil nitrate supply of what's maybe there. But I think there's some caveats around trying to use that tool.
Yeah, and what would those be? I mean, that's calibration, right?
Yeah, so our traditional calibration for using recommendations is that you want to be in a field where you're not picking up any fertilizer N. So, maybe a starter-only banded type scenario, you can avoid those bands. The trouble is, there's not many fields left in Ontario where that you can find only starter-only and avoid any broadcast N. So that said, I think there's still people using PSNTs as a tool. They're maybe not using the recommendations that are calibrated for no fertilizer, but they're maybe using it on a relative basis to compare year over year or different fields or that sort of thing to see how supply is different.
Ben, let's talk about demand later in the season. You've done a lot of work on, what the corn crop needs a little later on. Once we get past side dress, do we need to think about, supplying some end of this crop later in the season?
Yeah, so I think there's some other opportunities there. From work that Bill Dean and Caleb Niemeyer did at Elora, there was a strong relationship with rainfall kind of in the mid-June to mid-July timeframe. And yield, and then at Elora, yield was a strong driver of optimum N rates. The higher the moisture in the period, the higher yields were, and the higher the optimum N rate. So I think it gives some more options for trying to tailor the right nitrogen rate for that field, given the year you've had. Something you can't do at pre-plant time, and maybe not even quite at side dress timing.
Hey, final question, and that is about, this second crop of corn here in Ontario that's been going in the ground in the last week. The question for you is, if we got a crop going in that late, is it a case where we push nitrogen rates or we pull things back? I mean, a lot of dairy farmers, for example, just want to get some silage in here and need to feed some cattle. How do they approach nitrogen?
I guess if we're planting late because things have been really wet and we think there's been some losses or less mineralization, on that side, you'd maybe think rates would have to be bumped up. But I think on this, the demand side, if we're planting corn on June 10th or June the 15th, and we're usually planting corn in May, we probably have to temper our expectations for yield, and that's likely going to reduce our nitrogen recommendations from the demand side of things.
Yeah, so we'll probably ratchet it back depending on, and very almost site specific, isn't it? You really got to take this from field to field.
I think it depends on planting date, how wet things were for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Ben, hey, appreciate you making some time for Real Agriculture. Great to have you on the Corn School.
Always good talking to you, Bern.